How's it going, everybody? SJ's Disney Adventures here, and I'm back with a new ranking video. Now, at this time, I'm currently blocked out of Disneyland because of the pass that I have, so it might take a minute before I'm able to get another one of those videos out, but luckily, I did a last-minute one with that character compilation video that I hope you guys enjoyed. And today, I decided I wanted to go through Disney history and watch all 63 official Walt Disney Animation Studios films. Now, it was a real journey to get through all of them, and I enjoyed being able to really see like the full history of Disney and how they've evolved, going back to like 1937 with Snow White and Seven Dwarfs, and then going all the way back to last year with Moana 2. And even later this year, we're going to get Zootopia 2, which is a nice little treat as well. Now, before I get you all asking in the comments where blank movie is, I need to set a couple of rules. So, to begin, I'm only ranking the films in the official Disney canon. So I'm not going to be talking about any films from like the other like mini studios that Disney's acquired over the years. So no Pixar, no Disney Toon Studios, meaning like none of the direct DVD sequels, no Goofy movie. I'm not doing Planes. And I'm also not including films that are animated that have the Disney brand but are not in the canon. So that would include things like Blue Sky Studios films like Ice Age. We're not doing Nightmare Before Christmas or any other animated film that Fox made that Disney acquired over time. And also, as a little disclaimer, if I change my outfit or location at all throughout the video, I'm filming this on different locations and across different days, so just as a heads up for you guys. But with all that said, let's begin my ranking of the top 63 films from Disney Animation Studios. Walt Disney Animation Studios, I should say specifically. All right, starting off with a bad tier, I'd say these are the films that are just not worth your time and ones that I would never watch again unless I do another Disney marathon. And even then, it's gonna be a real slog to get through these. So this tier starts off with Melody Time. So I know it's probably not as fair to like put this film down here, but it's just such a slog to get through. Now, for context with Melody Time, and spoiler alert, some of just what's going to be at the bottom tier in general, Melody Time is one of those films that came out during World War II, or the World War II era, I should say. So the period of World War II and kind of like that small period after where Disney was really trying to like get back on their feet, where Disney, as a way to make money, instead of releasing actual movies with like full stories to save a little bit of money, they got a collection of like their little short films and put them all together, and that's how we got Melody Time. And this is just one of those package films, and my biggest issue with the package films are they just don't really have much substance or story. Like, I'll be honest, I don't even remember the majority of what happened in this film. I just remember it being a slog to get through. I think at most I remember the Johnny Appleseed parts, and I know we got a little bit of Donald and the Three Caballeros. Oh, spoiler alert, I don't have that film very high either. And it just ends up being a forgettable mess that, and while there are like other films that are also not that great, at least they have a little bit more substance and story. But that's why I also get if you feel like it's not as fair to put this film as high. But at the end of the day, do we really care about just a collection of short films? Next up at number 62, we got Make Mine Music. Now, the issue with Make Mine Music is very similar to Melody Time, where at the end of the day, it's just a collection of short films rather than an actual movie. Now, this one actually does come to mind a little bit more because, fun fact, this is actually the only film in the Disney canon that is not on Disney Plus, and I think that just has to do with some of the short films that are a little bit more problematic. Like, I know they had like a wartime film that feels very propaganda-ish and very outdated in today's age. But I think what puts this a little bit above Melody Time, even though in reality they're kind of on the same level, is at least there's multiple different shorts, so you're not just stuck with one the whole time if there's one that you're not a fan of. I mean, it doesn't make it any better, but at least there's something there. I will note that I also think some of the films in here are a little bit more interesting, while not necessarily like great. Like, there's that one with like the whale trying to be an opera singer, and even though that's still not an amazing like short, it's a little bit more interesting, I'd say. All right, coming in at number 61, we got Saludos Amigos. So this is another one of those package era films. Fun fact for this one, I know this was actually a film that the U.S. had sent Walt Disney to make. I don't know if they sent him to make it directly, but I know that this film was like one of those technically like U.S. mandated projects to help keep good relations with like the South American countries. And yeah, this one's not my favorite either. It's got a couple more memorable shorts. Like it's got that one plain little short that I thought was cute, and some of the Donald stuff was kind of interesting, but not really at the same time. And honestly, it leaves me to just not have that much to say about it. All right, next up at number 60, I have Dinosaur. Actually, changing it up now instead of just trashing on all the package era films. Don't worry, we'll still get to those, but Dinosaur, I'd say, is the weakest when it comes to like full length animated features from the studio. And to be honest, it's just really forgettable. And even when watching it, just felt like such a slog to get through. It was also Disney's first time using like CGI animated animation, like for the most part in this film. I know they blended CGI with live action backgrounds, so and looking back, it hasn't held up the best, considering it was only around like 5 years after Toy Story had came out. And I'll be honest, I had to look up the name of the characters just before filming this, just to be able to remember things to talk about. And Aladar, I'd say, is one of the weaker Disney protagonists overall. I barely remember much. At most, the most I really remember had to do with like the scenes like towards the end. I don't even remember the name of the dinosaur, but there's some cool like suspenseful scenes, I'll admit. And I'll admit that some of the backgrounds do look nice, but it's easily still one of the most forgettable films. And while I appreciate that Disney was trying to do something new at the time, I think ended up just being one of their weakest films. And I know like one of the common complaints about this film are like the lemurs. I actually thought they were okay. They annoyed me a few times, but I feel like I was more bored than groaning. But it's still a film that I feel like I have nothing to talk about really. All right, and finally, rounding out the bad tier, we have The Three Caballeros. I actually really wanted to like this film too, but like some of the other package era films, it just didn't really provide much substance, in my opinion. And while it definitely is the better of like the other like package era films I've talked about earlier, mainly because like there's times where it does tell a little bit of a narrative, specifically in the way that Donald's like opening like these three different presents. And I'll admit this one probably gave me the most chuckles out of the other films, like mainly like in the fact that like the film kind of just doesn't take itself that seriously towards the end. And some of the scenes where like Donald's trying to get a girlfriend on the beach were kind of charming and kind of funny. But other than that, there just really wasn't that many that really memorable scenes in general. And I feel like there's two more package era films that we haven't talked about yet, not including like the Fantasias, that I feel like just provide a lot more. And this is still a film I'm never gonna choose to like pick over others. All right, now that we finally completed the bad tier, we're gonna move on over to the tier. So I would say the movies that are in this tier are still a step up from bad, but are still films that I'm not a big fan of, and I'm probably just gonna skip for the most part. But I'd say that they still provide a little bit more than some of the films that I already mentioned. And I think a big part of that is that most of them are not package films. I'm just really trashing on these package films, aren't I? So overall, I'd say that the films in this tier are more so mediocre at best. Kicking off the A tier, I have Home on the Range at number 59. And this is probably a film a lot of you guys probably expected to be right towards the bottom. And Yeah, it's definitely one of the weakest Disney films, and I'd say other than like package films, it's definitely the second weakest in the Disney canon. And while it is like more of a film overall rather than like the package era films, it still feels more like a cartoon than a movie, if that makes sense. Where I feel like a lot of like this movie's goal is just to tell different like slapstick humor or using like dumb cow humor and such. It's just not a film that's funny at all, and I find more annoying than funny in general. And yeah, there's some like cooler moments. And that's kind of where like the more cartoony element does work sometimes. Like some of like the chase scenes can sometimes be enjoyable, but overall, this was a film that ended up not being the best and just has a lot of really dumb humor. And I'll give it credit that at least some of it's a little bit more memorable, but not in necessarily the best of ways. So overall, this is a film I still wouldn't recommend, and honestly, would still probably not rewatch. In fact, I remember I saw this film as a kid, and this was my first time rewatching it since, and I realized how much of it I didn't really remember. So I feel like that says a lot about this film. All right, coming up next at number 57, we got Fun and Fancy Free. Yeah, we still have a couple of package era films to talk about, but I'll say this is definitely one of the better ones. I'm saying one of the better ones, even though this is still like right towards the bottom. And I'd say part of what makes this film a little bit better than some of the other package era movies is that it did a little bit of a different trend with this one, where instead of having like just a big collection of shorts compiled together, they went with just two shorts, and they take up like half of the movie each. And I'd say that's both a pro and a con to it. I'll start with the cons first, because the first short is the one about Bogo the bear, and I'll be honest, this short really wasn't that great, and I found it just bland. I couldn't really get into the story as much, and it felt a little bit too much. Like they were trying to keep with like the circus theme, like with Dumbo at first, and then just feels like it jumps a little bit all over the place. Although where I will give credit to this film is within the second short, which is Mickey and the Beanstalk, which I think is a really solid short, and I enjoyed the way that they retold like the Jack and the Beanstalk story, but used like the Mickey twist. I feel like just seeing Mickey, Goofy, and Donald just automatically helps bring a little bit more entertainment value to the film. I always love like the scenes, especially with Donald, where we see him going on like his little hunger strike and seeing how like intimidating that is. And it's still not my favorite short, but it's a little bit more entertaining, I'd say. Although my issue with the short, though, it has less to do with the short, but more so like the way that they have like the narrative around it. Like they have like this guy at a party with like a ventriloquist dummy that talk about like the narrative of the film and kind of do some narrations, and I feel like those parts are the annoying parts. And if I'm ever gonna rewatch Mickey and the Beanstalk, or let alone Fun and Fancy Free, I'm not gonna watch Fun and Fancy Free. I'm just gonna watch Mickey and the Beanstalk, and you watch it with one of the other narrations. Like I forgot if it's either Professor Von Drake or Scrooge McDuck. One of them had like a little narration that they do, and I'd much rather watch that than rewatch Fun and Fancy Free. Alrighty, next up at number 56, we got Chicken Little. This is another film that you guys probably would have expected to be right towards the bottom. In fact, I know a lot of people usually put this directly at number 63. And while I personally wouldn't go that far, I still acknowledge that Chicken Little isn't the greatest of films. I'll admit, nostalgia plays a smaller role, as I did grow up a little bit with this film, but I'd even say growing up now, like I can acknowledge that it's not a very well made movie. In fact, to be honest, I think a lot of what's carrying this from being lower is I feel like it has a lot of unironic humor, whereas like a lot of parts are more just like entertainingly bad rather than just bland. And I think what I'm noticing with like these lower tier Disney films is that I'd rather watch like some of their not as they're like not great films, rather than they're just boring films. And Chicken Little at least have a little bit more to talk about. Like, obviously, like some like the main criticisms are it has like this mean spirited tone throughout, which I feel like isn't great. And Chuck, Chicken Little's dad, it definitely terrible character with how he was written. The sci-fi twist that they do is kind of interesting, but also a little weird too at the same time. I would admittedly say that the finale of the film is actually pretty entertaining, minus like some of like the pop culture references. Honestly, this kind of feels like a DreamWorks film disguised as a Disney film with how many pop culture references that they go for. And I'd say the characters, I can at least like remember who they are. Granted, I think part of that has to do with like watching it growing up, and the fact that I feel like kind of like I mentioned, it's more memorable of a film than like the package films or Dinosaur and even Home on the Range. I'd rather watch Chicken Little. That and I feel like it's decently paced despite like some of its more story issues. Like it goes by pretty fast. I still wouldn't recommend this one. That's why it's still kind of like in the area, but every once in a while, it's not the worst thing to watch in the world. All right, next up at number 55, we have The Black Cauldron. And this is the film that almost put Disney out of business in the 80s, specifically Disney Animation, because I know right after the failure of this film, Disney was really like hesitant on making more animated films. And luckily, they ended up still making them, which was amazing. We'll get to like some of those films that saved Disney a little bit later on. For the film that almost kind of destroyed Disney and is kind of like the black sheep of the company, film is eh. I think it perfectly encapsulates the tier of where we're at. It's eh. Like, it's okay. Or not even okay, just not that great. It's not as memorable either. Like, honestly, I think I only put it above Chicken Little because it benefits from having stronger animation overall. Torrent, I'd still say, is one of the weakest Disney protagonists. I think he's annoying throughout and tries to talk like he's like this big, strong character when literally the plot like carries him throughout with plot conveniences. I forgot the name of the furry guy. He got a little annoying sometimes. He had some fun moments, but mostly was annoying. And Alonwe, similar. Like, she probably has the most personality of the group, but still ends up not being the most interesting of characters. And even the Horned King, which I know a lot of people say is like the one highlight of the film, I still think he's really weak, like narratively. He has like cool moments, I guess. And I think that kind of sums up the film. There's cool moments throughout the film, but overall it's nothing special. And I really feel like Disney should have really worked with the narrative a little bit more. But I know this film also went really over budget, so that does say a lot about this film. But I will say that it's very much carried by the animation. The animation is actually pretty good. It's not as good as like Renaissance era animation, and honestly, even like Silver era animation, some is better, but animation wise, it's a little bit better than a lot of like the films I've mentioned. All right, next up at the number 54 spot, I have Dumbo. This is probably going to be my first hot take of the video, since I know Dumbo is a classic and all, but I just couldn't get into it on this rewatch. It helps that it's, I want to say, the shortest Disney film besides Saludos Amigos, or it's at least down there for sure. But overall, I just don't really have that much to talk about for Dumbo. Like, yeah, it's a classic story, and you know the actual like main scenes with Dumbo flying definitely are a big highlight of the film. But I just feel like a lot of it is just so mean spirited and gives kind of a sour taste. And especially like the first half of the film, and even like throughout, I feel like it really drags out its runtime when I think this really could have worked as maybe like a 30-minute short. And I feel like you really see it like I know there's like iconic scenes, like the pink elephant scene, but I just didn't care for it and thought it was just dumb. I honestly think that the Heffalump and Woozle scene from the Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh does like that weird like hallucinatory sequence a lot better than the pink elephant scene, and does so in a more memorable way. And um, also, Disney, what were you thinking naming one of the crows Jim? Like, you were kind of asking for controversy there by doing that. Um, Again, it's still in the ant here because the story is still classic, and when Dumbo does actually get his moment where he flies, it is really good. And honestly, I think it just kind of says a lot too, though, because that's only really in like the last 10-ish, maybe even a little less minutes of the film. And the film kind of just has an abrupt ending, kind of. So it's weird. It feels like it could have been condensed, but also could have been longer. So that's why I have it here. Alrighty, coming in at number 53, we got The Rescuers. This is probably another one of my hotter takes. But then again, I found a couple people that also genuinely don't care that much about Rescuers, and that's kind of where I'm at too, because it's all right. Like, I enjoy Bianca and Bernard as characters. They have like a fun little back and forth chemistry, I'll admit. I think they're a lot better in Down Under, which I'll talk about a little later when I get to that film. But the actual story of the film is okay. Pacing is very slow, I felt, especially in like the first 2/3 of the film. And even then, like, I still struggle to find like that memorable of moments. Like, sure, there's some cool little action within like the bayou stuff, and I do like that they had like a lot of animals implemented into the film, and it's surprisingly pretty dark since it kind of dives into like kid trafficking themes. But I feel like overall, I just didn't have that memorable of an experience. The villain, Medusa, I thought was just bland and forgettable and boring. Um, it has a little bit more going for it than I'd say like Dumbo and like some of those other films, but overall, I still don't have a whole lot to talk about for this film. Next up at 52, I got Fantasia 2000. I really struggled with where to put the Fantasia films just because very similar to like those package era films, they don't really have as much story, and I think that's what I'm noticing as I'm going through this ranking. I prefer like the films with like more explicit stories. I will say that unlike the package era films, I see the vision a lot more for these. I mean, I see it for like Saludos Amigos and Three Caballeros, with it like paying tribute to like the Latin American countries and South American countries. But I feel like Fantasia, you see a lot more like passion put into these projects where it's genuinely trying to just show off the art of animation. And on that level, the animation is absolutely gorgeous. And I like that compared to like the first Fantasia, since this is taking place like much closer to like more modern times, like it came out in the year 2000, so obviously animation has advanced a lot throughout the 60 years that these two films came out. So I do like that it really takes advantage of that to show off like some of like the new advancements of animation. Like, for example, like the whale sequence uses like computer generated effects, or CGI I should say. And of course, we got like that Nutcracker little short that kind of showed that off a little bit too. And I forget the name of the final sequence, but very beautiful sequence with how like it shows off nature. I think again, just in general though, like it's not a film I'm gonna immediately pick to rewatch, and while it does offer a lot more than some of like the other like package era films, I would say, and I think in general, I like seeing like these sequences that more so show off like what you can do with animation a lot more than just a compilation of cartoon shorts. No offense to those, just that's just my preference. but Fantasia 2000 does offer a little bit more. Alrighty, next up at number 51, we have the final package era film, The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad. Finally, we're done with these package films. Although I will say that they ended on a better note than I'll give it credit for. While I still think it's more in the area, at least Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad, I feel like offer a little bit more in terms of story. Very similar to Fun and Fancy Free. Rather than taking just a compilation of little short cartoons, they actually split it in half, so you get two different stories. You start off with the Wind in the Willows story with Mr. Toad, and then you go off into the Legend of Sleepy Hollow story with Ichabod and the Headless Horseman. And right off the bat, what automatically brings this film much higher is the small sequence where we get the Headless Horseman. That was a really amazing moment, and honestly kind of carries the film a little bit. I ended up liking the Sleepy Hollow sequence, Sleepy Hollow sequence a lot more than I expected, which was funny because when I first came into it, I was expecting the Wind in the Willows sequence a little more. It was just okay. It's not super memorable to me. I don't really get why people have this weird obsession with Mr. Toad, and I'll be honest, I don't really care for his ride at Disneyland either. But that's a whole other issue. But the film on its own, it's okay. It's not super memorable, but it has its fun moments. And then the Sleepy Hollow stuff, I enjoyed quite a bit. It's not top tier Disney, but we're getting closer to the okay stuff. All right, and finally rounding out the tier at number 50, we got The Sword in the Stone. This is the one silver era Disney film that I personally don't really care for. It's all right. I mean, I feel like my main issue with it is it feels a lot more like just an extended cartoon sequence rather than a movie itself. Since we get this long, prolonged sequence where Merlin is just teaching Arthur random little things as they turn into animals, and it's okay, I guess. It has fun moments, but it doesn't really elevate the film. I feel like it really takes a while for the film to actually get going. And while I love Merlin as a character, I feel like he has a lot of fun. I feel like it takes a minute to really get to those really big highlight things. Madame Mim, who's supposed to be the main villain of the film, doesn't show up to 2/3 in. And while those sequences with her, and especially her duel with Merlin, are a big highlight of the film, it's such a small little sequence. If I ever want to go back to Sword in the Stone, I feel like I'm just gonna rewatch that specific sequence. And don't get me started on the ending, since it just ends so abruptly. And especially for a film called Sword in the Stone, we don't get to that sequence until the very end of the movie. And even then, it feels very rushed. While it's kind of highlighted in the beginning, we really don't get a whole lot of it. And I feel like there was supposed to be more, but it ended up being just all that we were really able to get. And I feel like it hurts the film because of that. Alrighty, and with the tier wrapped up, we're going to move on to what I would call the alright tier. Now, these films I'd say are just okay to me, but I'd say they're at least worth watching once. And while some might still be a little bit on the forgettable side, I'd say this is where the positives start to outweigh the negatives, I'd say personally. Alright, well, starting off the alright tier at number 49, I got Fantasia. Now, this is probably another big hot take of mine, but I'll admit that this probably isn't the film for me. It's a film that I could definitely appreciate, and very much like Fantasia 2000, I really appreciate how Disney really tried to go through the true art of animation and really showcasing that off. Though, admittedly, it's still not a film for me. I think it still definitely does go a tier above Fantasia 2000, though. I think part of it being it's the original, so I think it definitely gets a little bit more merit off of that. That, and I forgot to mention this with like the Fantasia 2000 stuff, but some of like the celeb cameos were a little distracting at points. And honestly, I know it's just one host the whole time. Sometimes it's slightly distracting, but I also get it. Like I like that they introduce like the musical pieces before they actually like go into like the little short animation music pieces. I think this one is also carried a little bit by having slightly better shorts. Like, granted, Sorcerer's Apprentice is in both, but it's hard to like judge that one for Fantasia 2000 because it came from this film, and that's probably my favorite sequence of both films. The Sorcerer's Apprentice with Mickey, and such an iconic moment too. And there's a couple other good ones too, like the dinosaur one. I'll be honest, I forgot some of the names of the shorts, but I remember like the exact theming. I really like the opening short a lot, and then while it's not personally my cup of tea, I can appreciate Night at Bald Mountain for the way that it tried to convey its message and how it ended up with like the Ave Maria scene, which I think really put the scene all together. I think just overall though, these films are very nice to, look at, but aren't necessarily the ones that I'm gonna pick when I'm picking like my Disney movie for the day. Alrighty, coming in at number 48, I got Atlantis: The Lost Empire. This is another film from Disney history that nearly put the company bankrupt, or not bankrupt, but lost the film a lot of money in general. And I know it's kind of hit a little bit of a cult following. And this was actually watching everything for this ranking. It was actually my first time watching this film, and I'll be honest, I couldn't really get into it. Like, it didn't really work for me as much as it worked for others. I can appreciate like the settings that they try to go through, and I like that they put like a new spin on like the whole Atlantis twist. But overall, it's not my not very memorable to me. 'Cause I remember like some of the things I had heard before. Like, I always hear people talking about how much they love Kida as a character. I'll be honest, I don't really remember a whole lot that she did. There's some cool action, pretty good 2D animation, I'd say, especially like now that 2D animation's mostly kind of dead when it comes to Disney. So it was nice to really see like more modern 2D animation, especially in like that post-Renaissance era. Other than that, though, like there's some good performances. Like Michael J. Fox does a good job as Milo, and I could see like where like people might be able to resonate with some characters, and I do admit I enjoyed like the journey to Atlantis a lot. When we get to Atlantis, I feel like it kind of slows down a lot, but overall, it's not a bad film. Just one that I would probably take a minute to rewatch. Alrighty, coming in at number 47, I got Bambi. Now, Bambi is another one of like those classic Disney films, and while I definitely appreciate it for what it did, I think that's kind of what Bambi is. It's like a foundation film where I feel like other films of like similar caliber were able to really expand on like the themes of Bambi and make it a lot stronger, whether it be like Lion King as a very strong example of that. But I still appreciate Bambi for what it does. It has a very classic coming of age tale, and I'll admit, the stuff with like the hunter, of course, that devastating scene in the middle of the film, it's definitely a very effective moment, and I kind of like they made it very like suspenseful in the sense that on your first watch, if you're a little younger, it might take a minute for you to understand like what actually happened. And I think I heard like something, I forgot what it was, but I heard something that talked about how like the hunter is like one of the greatest villains that never appears on screen, which is kind of like crazy to think that that character that never shows up actually had like such a big impact. And yeah, it's still a very solid film. I feel like we're missing a little bit of something in the middle. I know Bambi 2 kind of covers like, it's kind of like a midquel which really shows like Bambi like after like the death of his mother. I wish we could have seen a little bit more of that. So like throw in like not the entirety of Bambi 2 in here, but I think elements of like a short little moments I think could have made the film elevate a little more. I think this is also where we're starting to see like some more memorable sidekicks. Like here we got Flower and Thumper, which I think are pretty fun characters. I think just like I said a little earlier, I think there's others I would rewatch over this, but that doesn't take away from how impactful of a movie Bambi really is. All right, and next up at number 46, we got Strange World. One of Disney's newer films, actually. Came out just about 3 years ago. And fun fact, this is actually the film that broke my streak of watching every Disney movie in theaters since Wreck-It Ralph. And I've seen like ones before that in theaters too. I think I just skipped a few, but yeah, I had a streak from Wreck-It Ralph all the way to all the way to Encanto, where I saw every Disney film in theaters when it came out, and I somehow just missed this one. I think I was just really busy, and the reviews weren't the strongest, so ended up being a skip. That and Disney didn't market this film very well at all, and so finally watching it, I think it's okay. Um, Definitely don't think it deserves like the extreme hate that it got at the time, but I also can't really defend the film because it's also not great. I appreciate some like the themes that they went forward with this film, like mainly in regards to like the theme of like father son, and how oftentimes we tend to take on some elements of like our fathers if we don't deal with like our trauma from the past, which kind of goes into like another like generational trauma theme. Which, to be honest, though, even though like it is an effective theme for this story, I feel like it's done much better in Encanto, and the adventure aspect definitely is there. It gives Treasure Planet vibes, which I'll get to in a future time once I get to that on the ranking. And I'll admit that I feel like there is a good amount of creativity. I think where this film does fall flat, though, is one, not super duper memorable. Like the Clades are okay characters. The grandpa I think is a little bit more memorable, although he's also kind of tough to he's not very likable at first until further down in the film, and I think the film also doesn't really work on a humor level because I noticed it kind of tried to be a little bit of a comedy at times, and that's where I feel like the film also kind of fell a little flat. So it's another one of those like adventure films that Disney try to like experiment with, where you got to appreciate that they tried something a little bit different from like their typical like fairy tale slash musical film, but also acknowledge that it probably could have been a little bit better. All right, and coming in at number 45, we have Oliver and Company. Now, this is actually one that I was actually pretty excited to watch, since this was actually my first time watching this one for this ranking in particular, and I thought it was all right. I grew up a little bit with the Oliver Twist story, so I kind of knew what to expect, and was excited to see Disney's kind of spin on the story, and I thought they did all right with it. I like that they had like the cute little animal twist and had like all the cats and the dogs. And while I struggle to remember some of their names besides like Oliver himself and the what's his name, the Billy Joel dog, of course. I think my one issue with it is that it just doesn't really feel as much like a Disney film. It just feels like your typical 80s animated film, and it's still definitely a step up from like Chicken Little and Home on the Range that feel like they were made by like probably like DreamWorks. But still, this one still feels like a more generic studio film. It has like some cool sequences, like the car chases at the end are really nice. I like Oliver's relationship with like his new owner and with the Billy Joel dog. And Fagin's a pretty interesting character too. But I think just in general, this one ended up being slightly more forgettable than I would have liked, but doesn't necessarily make it bad. Like, I wouldn't mind going back to rewatch it, just it wouldn't be at the top of my list to pick to rewatch. Coming in at number 44, I got Treasure Planet. And this was actually another one, that was my first time personally watching this one, and I thought it was all right. It definitely had a lot more than I expected in terms of like stuff I really enjoyed. And overall, I think it's pretty interesting that they took the original novel of Treasure Island and turned it into like this sci-fi Treasure Planet twist. I thought that was pretty cool, and I like that they went with like a more sci-fi, steampunk, pirate aesthetic, which I thought was pretty cool. And overall, had a lot more depth to it than I had expected going into it, because I remember watching it as a kid. I got bored in the beginning, but it's actually got a lot more to it than I kind of expected. Like, for example, I really liked Jim Hawkins and John Silver's relationship throughout the film, and I kind of liked their dynamic with like their father son like relationship. I thought that was pretty interesting. Jim's a character that I feel like is one that I'm meant to like a lot more than I actually do, because I like the idea of his character more than I like him himself. I don't know why necessarily. I don't know if that's just the way that he was written or his personality. In terms of other things, I did think some of the characters were a little annoying, like mainly like the morph gooey guy, and I think his name's Ben, the robot at the end. Both got a little bit annoying at times. And while like overall like the story is somewhat interesting and animation is gorgeous, I personally would say that this is the weakest film of John Musker and Ron Clements, at least within like their Disney career. But to be fair, they've made so many great films from Disney that something had to be on the bottom, and unfortunately, it had to be this one, in my opinion. And overall, like, it was a solid film, but just kind of forgettable in the end. But I still personally enjoyed it more than I expected to. All right, coming in at number 43, I got The Rescuers Down Under. Now, already, I think this is a vast improvement over the original Rescuers. The original Rescuers has like some like charm to it, but was overall just a film I was not a big fan of at all. This one, while it's still not my favorite, I still personally put it a little higher, mainly because I feel like it has a little bit more to offer. Particularly, I think the action is a lot better in this film, and I think that Bernard and Bianca are much better developed as characters in this, and I kind of like that they are a lot more developed within their relationship itself. I feel like it helps bring a little bit more layers to the movie. And I'll give it credit that the Australian Outback, I feel like, gives it a more unique twist. And I don't think we have any other Disney films that take place out in the Australian Outback. So I feel like it gives a little bit more of an identity to it. There's still some things I'm not the biggest fan of. Like, I still think sometimes the story takes a little bit to drag on. The villain, I don't think is super memorable. Like, I'd say they're probably still better than Medusa, because Medusa I thought was just a weird villain, whereas this guy, I feel like he's at least a little bit more intimidating. So I'd say like execution wise, he's a little bit better. Conceptually, probably not my favorite villain. Um, I do think I like the kid Cody in this more than the kid in the last one. And the film gets pretty dark, surprisingly, which very bold move on Disney's part, which I'll commend them with. But overall, still a solid enough film that I can put it a little bit higher than the original Rescuers film. And it is a shame, because I think this was the one that they were kind of getting their groove with, and it is disappointing that Bianca's voice actress passed away shortly after, so they ended up having to cancel the third film, which is unfortunate. And finally, wrapping up the all right tier at number 42, we have the Aristocats. This film almost managed to get out of it, but at the end of the day, I thought it was still just an all right film. It's a cute film with cats, and I enjoy like what the film does offer. I do think it's kind of crazy that Phil Harris did like 3 films in a row for Disney between this, Jungle Book, and Robin Hood, and kind of plays very similar characters, but I still think it was a cute little storyline, and had some like interesting moments too. I know they market the heck out of the little cats, especially Marie, and had some fun music. Just, it's not one that I'm striving to go and rewatch immediately. Like, I think some of the side characters, they're okay, but forgettable. I think the main cats, I think, are pretty interesting, though. And just don't have as much to say about this film, other than, hey, I think it's alright. And of the films in this tier, it's probably the one I would pick to rewatch next. If that makes sense. Like, if you give me a list of just the films in the alright tier, I'll be like, yeah, I'll pick Aristocats. And with all that being said, we're now going to move over to the tier that I would call enjoyable but flawed, or flawed of fun would be another term for it. And I'd say these are the films that we're moving over more to, like, I'd say overall they're good. Good. Like, step up above alright. And while I tend to have a little bit more flaws with these films as well, I still find them pretty enjoyable. And if I had a pick to watch them, I usually wouldn't be too upset about watching them. All right. And kicking off the flawed fun tier at number 41, I have Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. This is the film that started it all and truly did set the foundation for animation as a whole when it came to Disney and just in general, too. Now, Snow White is definitely one of like those classic films. It's the first in the Disney canon, and I think it does a lot of great things. Other than like setting like that foundational piece, I think it helped kind of set like a good and strong formula for Disney and brought in a lot of like traditions, like the sidekicks with like the Seven Dwarves, which I feel like bring a lot of good charm to the film and sets like a good foundation with like the fairy tale type setting. Of course, I personally did have to put it a little bit lower, unfortunately, because it being the first film also makes it a little bit dated, in my opinion. Mainly in, like, the storytelling, I would say. Like, I feel like when Walt made the film, it felt a lot more like as if it was like a cartoon that was extended to 75 minutes. And I don't mean that in a bad way, just when you look at the film, it's structured a lot more like as if it was like a cartoon special with how much timing it takes for certain events that take place. Like, for example, you get like 7 minutes of the dwarves just looking around for Snow White in the house, or Snow White like just hanging out in the Seven Dwarfs' house with not much plot progression taking place. And then not until like the last like 15 minutes of the film does like the big stuff actually happen. And honestly, like as cool as Queen Grimhilda, the evil queen, is as a villain, she's very underutilized in this film, I would say. And I feel like she could have had a little bit more development or just more screen presence, I would say, in general. And I feel like that would have been really cool. But other than that, I'd say it's still a very solid film, and it's good to rewatch here and there just to see like that little big piece of Disney history. Coming up next at number 40, I got The Fox and the Hound. Another cute little story about two friends that are not meant to be friends, and I feel like it provides a lot of strong like emotional baggage to this film. I think that's also kind of the weakness of the film. Like, it just has like this overly somber tone that I feel like makes it a little bit less comfortable to watch at times. It doesn't necessarily make it a bad film, just one that's tougher to rewatch, I would personally say. And it kind of carries on like a couple more like little foundational pieces that like other Disney films kind of carry on nowadays. At times, like it feels like big successor to Bambi, which I know I mentioned Bambi. I feel like the formula for Bambi worked better in other films. I personally do think it worked a little bit better here, specifically with like Todd's story, and I think Disney also you could kind of tell that even though like yes they made it like a weirdly like somber film, I can kind of tell that they kind of pulled their punches a little bit too. Like, I think it would have been stronger if they killed off Chief, because I know that was like a big like controversial moment within like the Disney company that they feel like they should have killed him off, but they chickened out at the last second. Still a cute film overall, just not one that I would personally choose to rewatch, but there's things to appreciate here. Next up at number 39, I have Pocahontas. I don't know how controversial of a take it is to put Pocahontas down here, but personally wasn't one that really stood out to me. And I'd say, other than Rescuers Down Under, I would personally say it's the weakest Renaissance film. And it definitely has some stuff to love about it. I think the animation's really solid. I think here is where we're really getting into like the really good musicals, like Colors of the Wind by far, amazing song, and even some other ones like Just Around the Riverbed is a really good one, and Savages brings a lot of strong power to the film. And animation, absolutely gorgeous. It's a Renaissance film, so it's to be expected. I know like there's some controversy with like the historical aspects of it. I'm not the biggest fan of that, and it's a little weird the way that they like wrote it in, like specifically like the Pocahontas and John Smith storyline when the actual history of that is, yeah, we don't talk about that. That's a lot of bad stuff there. Um, I would say Mako is one of the better Disney sidekicks, albeit I'm a little biased because I like raccoons. And while like the history around the film, like this historical context, I should say, isn't great, I feel like it does give it a little bit of identity too. So it's very much a mixed bag, but I would still say like the good outweighs the bad overall. All right, coming up next at about number 38, I got Ralph Breaks the Internet. Now, you'll see when I get to Wreck-It Ralph that I really love the first Wreck-It Ralph film, and at first I kind of had like a blind kind of love for this film when it first came out, but I think that had to do more with just I wanted more Wreck-It Ralph content and was happy just to get it. But the more I reflected on the film later on, the more I realized it's a really flawed movie. Like, don't get me wrong, it has its moments for sure. Like, the way that they explore the internet, and I'll just say, like, the world building of the internet, I think was done in a very interesting type of way. And I think they definitely do a great job of exploring, like, the different little concepts that they kind of explore. And I like the way that they implemented some, like, those aspects, like how they put in, like, the whole, like, dark web area, or even like the Oh My Disney section. Like, yeah, it's definitely just Disney just trying to cash in on all their properties, but also like, while like some scenes definitely were a little forced, I think like the princess scene itself was actually very strong, and I like that it played into Vanellope's arc. And overall, I'd say the first two-thirds of the film are pretty enjoyable. With the case of it being like internet humor, it does make some of the jokes feel a little outdated and cringy, like Ralph flossing and doing all like the random like video stuff. But for the most part, it's enjoyable enough. My issue with the film comes in the last third, because the film, without spoiling too much, what it kind of does is like around like a little after the hour mark, it solves like the main conflict of the film, and then it switches over to like a new storyline that builds upon it, and that storyline I feel like doesn't really work, particularly with like it just creates a lot of like issues. Like, sorry, I have to go into spoilers, but I don't like Vanellope's decision to go to Slaughter Race at the end. Like, yeah, I get the whole notion of like the themes of, you know, needing to expand and explore new things. But I also feel like it's kind of like a counter message from the last one, where Ralph had to really accept himself as like the villain, even though he doesn't necessarily have to be a bad guy. Whereas now it feels a little counterintuitive with now Vanellope like switching games. I don't know. I've always been very conflicted with that message, and Ralph's kind of insecurity being like the villain, I think is good in concept, but in execution, I feel like it makes Ralph look too insecure to the point where it loses some of its likability. It's still an enjoyable enough film, and it has moments. That's what I'd say. Like, this film has very strong moments, but other parts that are just a little messy. Up next at number 37, I got Lady and the Tramp. And this is another one I remember watching when I was a lot younger, and remember enjoying it then. I enjoyed it now too. It's a cute little love story between two dogs. we of course get the iconic spaghetti bellanotte scene, and I think um, I think one thing I did notice is it felt a little formulaic throughout, and not that it drags on because I feel like it's more enjoyable than a lot of like the like lower tier films, but I think it also just doesn't offer as much. I think there's a little bit too much mean spiritedness, like particularly like with like the owner and the Siamese cats, and um, especially like towards like the middle of the film where it's just Lady and Tramp kind of going on random side quests. You get a little bit of like that Sword in the Stone type of just filler, but to a lesser extent. Like it's not as outrageous as that film. And overall, like I think it's a harmless enough film where it still ends up being really enjoyable to watch, and it's one that putting on from time to time I enjoy it quite a bit. All right, coming in at number 36, I got Brother Bear. This is a film I wasn't sure how I was gonna rank at first because I remember liking it as a kid, but I know that now like I was gonna understand a lot more of like the mature themes, and wow, this is a pretty mature Disney film, especially like that first 20 minutes where it really like dives into like the themes of like death and spirituality, which is very crazy for like a Disney film. I will admit that I think it does struggle a little bit with tone, as right after like that 20 minutes it kind of shifts to like goofy animal story, and I think it's a little bit jarring at first. It doesn't turn into a bad film at all. In fact, I quite enjoy like the animal travel aspect. I really like Kanan, I think that's his name, and Coda's little relationship, and I like the way that they bring like the story like all together with like the whole brothers, and then Kanan having to be there for Coda at the end. Remember the Moose being okay comic reliefs. I'm not too familiar with like the actors' previous works, but I heard that they're like pretty big names. And overall, I like when Disney goes into like different like cultures that aren't usually like seen in like films. Like I want to say this was like Alaskan culture, and I thought that aspect of the film was pretty interesting. And overall, it's a film that, while it has like a slight mixed bag for me, I think overall I came out of it really enjoying it, and there's some nice little emotional pieces with the film as well that I really liked. All right, next up at number 35, I got Bolt. Another one of like those 2000 Disney movies, and it's also like one of the earlier CGI Disney films, like when they were first like really experimenting with it. And I feel like compared to like some of their other films, CGI is a little noticeable that it's not as great in quality. Like honestly, if you told me it was a Blue Sky film, I probably wouldn't have questioned it originally. Bolt itself, though, is a harmless enough movie, and I actually do quite enjoy it. It's a little formulaic and takes a lot of old tropes, like the dog that thinks that, you know, he's like the thing that he is on TV when he's really not, and having to go on this big road trip. That's what I'm realizing, kind of right here. We're talking about a lot of like those road trip types films right here. So a lot of like those typical tropes. I think the characters are good enough. I like Bolt's dynamic with Mittens, and I like how Mittens kind of has to teach him what it's like to be a real dog later on, and how we kind of get to see like I like that Bolt kind of sticks to who he is. Like he still tries to go back to Penny, even though like he's learning how to be a dog for the first time, and that's all I really have to say about it. It has some interesting aspects. Little bit of logic loops with Bolt, so like how Bolt doesn't catch on to like some of like the other things that are going on around him. Like what if they need to do a double take on certain action scenes? But at that point, you just start nitpicking just to nitpick, and at that point, you just got to accept the movie for what it is, and it's still an enjoyable enough film, and it has a lot of heart still, I would say. So while I did make like that comment in the beginning that it could seem like a Blue Sky film, I feel like it has enough Disney touch to where you can see like the heart put into it. And next up at number 34, I got Raya and the Last Dragon. And this is a film that has kind of dropped a little bit. I'm going to talk about a couple of these films where originally when I watched them, I really loved them and put them pretty high. But then as time went on, I realized it's not as good as I thought it was. Kind of like how Ralph Breaks the Internet was. I think Raya just has a couple too many story problems. Or once again, doing like the formula of we're kind of on like a road trip, although it is a lot more MacGuffin based, where they're trying to like find all of like the gems of Kumandra. And right off the bat, I'll just say right up front, the best thing about this film is the world building of Kumandra. I love the way that they truly showed off the world and just like the culture and the people that are in it and the different environments that you see. I feel like Disney did a really good job of showing off Kumandra. And honestly, I really think that this could have been strong as like a Disney Plus series. I think that would have fit better with like the formulaic nature of the movie as well. And while it's still good enough, like as is, like once again, like animation, action, amazing. I think I'm not the biggest fan of like some of the choices within the storytelling though. Like um I think while Raya and Namari have an interesting rivalry throughout the film, I think the way that they resolve that rivalry feels very forced. Like particularly like at the end when it came to like Namari having like the misunderstanding with killing Sisu, quote unquote, and I just feel like they rushed that part and it felt very forced. I think some of like the ensemble cast are okay. I do like that one taller buff guy, and the boat driver. Some of like the monkeys and the baby are a little annoying, and I think my other thing that kind of brings this film down a little bit too is I think I'd probably say Sisu herself, just because Disney likes to do this little trend where they get like this top actor and have him like do a lot of improv to like make like this cool sidekick character, and they did this with Aquafina, and I'm just not the biggest fan of Aquafina and her style of humor, so I ended up putting this a little bit lower because of that. That and like the storytelling itself, I think could have been better. So that's where I say like it's very enjoyable. Like there's really amazing things about it, but then there's some like not so amazing things about this film. But I'd still say like the fun outweighs the bad. All right, coming in at number 33, I got Meet the Robinsons. This was actually my first time watching this film, and when this film first came out, I never really gotten around to it, and overall, I enjoyed it quite a bit. It's not the most memorable film to me, but overall, I enjoyed it. Like, I enjoyed Lewis's little arc as he's at the orphanage and gets to go back in time, or technically to the future, saying kind of like how the world turns out to be, and kind of exploring like some of like his other little inventions too. I thought was cool. And the bowler hat guy, I think was actually a pretty interesting villain. I saw the twist coming towards the end of the film, but I still really enjoyed his little storyline. And overall, it's a strong enough film, just not as memorable as maybe others, but I'd still put it like right around here, I would say. And finally, rounding out the flawed fun tier at number 32, which is also our midpoint of the ranking, I got Moana 2. This is the most recent film in the Walt Disney canon, and it's a good enough film. I think I had it a little lower originally when I first saw it, but upon rewatching it two more times, I like it a little bit more than I feel like some people give it credit for. It's still nowhere near as good as the original. You'll see where I put the original later. And because for context with this movie, it was originally supposed to be a Disney Plus series, but then Bob Iger mandated that it be converted into a movie. And so they kind of had to rush this film out, and you can still feel a lot of like those episodic elements, and especially with like Moana's little crewmates that she has go along with her. They feel like they were meant for like that television type show, especially how a lot of them just feel like specific tropes. Like you got the old guy, you got the random fanboy, and you get the random inventor. And I'll be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of the newer characters. Um, and the songs took a minute to grow on me. I think some of them are a little bit better now, like looking back at them. To be fair, I actually did get to see Emily Bear and Abby Barlow at California Adventure perform like some of these songs live, and I thought that it was really cool to see. And I feel like that elevated like some of the songs for me because they specifically did Beyond, Get Lost, and Can I Get a She Who? And I feel like those three songs in particular grew on me. Although I also think singing them live might just be better in general. And looking at just other aspects of the movie too, I actually really do enjoy like the storyline of Moana needing to go and seek out other islands, and that in order for everyone to be safe, they need to like be able to be united with one another. Although I think an issue I do have with the film is I feel like it tries to take on this tone as if it's a lot more epic than it really is. Like I feel that especially with like the song Beyond, like specifically like the lyric of her saying that would she lose herself and all this feels like something much more epic is about to happen when that really isn't like the case at all. And I think it takes a while for Maui to show up, and I feel like it takes a little too long for him to show up. I do like all the stuff in Nalo's lair. That's probably like one of the highlights for me. And it makes me want Disney to make a Moana boat ride at Disneyland. I think that would be really cool if they ever did that. And I will admit that the finale is also really solid. Just comes with a couple of different flaws. And honestly, if they took an extra year to make this film, I think it could have been near the same level as like the original film. Alrighty, and as of now, that's all I have for you guys today. Make sure you guys stay tuned for part two. Make sure to like, subscribe, and put your notifications on so that way you guys know instantly when part two comes out. I just decided because this video is already more than an hour long, so you guys can watch this for now, and then part two will come out very soon. So thank you guys so much for watching, and feel free to leave down in the comments what are some of your guys' favorite Disney movies, and maybe if you guys want, you could leave your little ranking. And since this is technically the bottom half of the list, maybe tell me some of the Disney films you're not as big on. Thank you guys for watching.